Hey David, how are you?
I am well. How are you today?
I am good. Thank you again for joining us. We're really excited to have you.
We'll see at the end of the presentation, right?
It's true. You never know. But from what I've heard, everybody's very excited. We have about 28 people coming today.
Okay. We'll have some fun with this.
Good. Is there anything that you need me to do?
No, I don't
No?
think so.
Okay.
Unless, I mean, if there's something that historically gets covered that I don't, and people are too shy to ask about it, just chime in and I'll see what I can do. I guess Jonathan's showing up too, right?
Jonathan is showing up.
And you are both Jet veterans, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So just chime in whenever.
Yeah, so I think there's a few consulate members coming as well. So if you have any questions like to throw out there, and we're recording this, it probably told you when you logged in that we were recording this, but we're recording this so we can use it for future use if need be, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
So a few consulate members will be here. Jonathan and I will be here. Valerie, who you wouldn't know, but she's in the USA Jet. She's going to be here. So if you do have some questions about Jet and Jet specific things, we should be able to touch base on them or just to give you context. So I'll be monitoring the chat box. I don't know how you like to do Zooms, but if you want me to monitor the chat box, I can do that.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll keep an eye on it, but if you could, that would be great.
Perfect.
Boy, these folks must really want to go to Japan. 6:30 on a Friday.
I know.
Yeah.
It's no, yeah, I was surprised by the turnout. And I was so happy that you could do it on this day. We have a whole, I don't know if I shared with you the schedule, but you and Sarah are like our two experts that we have joining us, one for laws and the other one for like sake and etiquette and different things like that.
Oh, do you have sake Sarah?
Yeah, we do have sake Sarah.
Tell when she comes in, tell her whenever she does her presentation, tell her I said hi. When her presentations are top notch. I mean, people enjoy them so much.
I know, and she brings the best sake. I brought some from the gala home for her this past year, for my mother. I'm sorry. I brought some for my mother, and my mother was like, "This is the best sake I've ever had in my entire life." I was like, "Well, it's Sarah. That's fine." She knows what she's talking about.
So now, where in Japan did you go?
I was in Tokyo, actually.
Okay.
So I was one of the few Tokyo Jets, which is exciting to be one of the few Tokyo Jets. But it's one of those things where I got a lot of like the city lifestyle rather than that rural. So there are a few things that I'm missing out on. So Jonathan was in the rural area, so he'll be able to touch base on a little bit more of what was going on. I was also a private school jet, and most everybody is a public school jet. So I was an anomaly. Okay.
Yeah, my Japan experience is entirely urban. So there are different requirements in different parts of Japan, but we'll try to I'll see if I can touch on everything.
Okay. Just yeah, if you want, I mean, if you need any of my experience or Jonathan's or even the consulates, just ask and we'll be more than happy to just jump right in and give you a little bit from our experience.
And this is consulate, this is Atlanta.
This is the Atlanta consulate.
Okay.
Yes, we are not part of the DC consulate.
Okay.
And then I think if there's anything else. So yeah, just a quick FYI, because I know that we exchanged emails this week about the contracts. There's a saying in JET, which is every situation is different. So you don't ever get the same experience. So if you ask for any of our experiences, mine is going to be entirely different than Jonathan's. Just
Yeah, I looked at the program parameters,
good.
and
Okay.
I was more interested in sort of, is there a definition of inappropriate acts which could get you sent home? And there isn't. So I got the impression that it's a sliding scale.
Yeah, it's difficult to get sent home. From what I've been told, you have to do something that's very, very, very bad, like extremely bad, to be asked not to recontract the next
Right.
year, or they just have to not like you, like really not like you.
Yeah, I guess so.
But it's very difficult to not get that what do you call it, that recontract. So yeah, there's not just like a few things, because every BOE is different. So Board of Education. So
Right.
but how was your week? Was it hot like the rest of Northern Carolina?
Yeah, especially so down here. I'm in Charleston right now, and so
Oh, are you?
it's beautiful out, but yeah, it is toasty.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm in Pinehurst, so it's just flat golf lands with extreme heat. But
I was brought here as an attorney in 1990 when the Japanese were still buying up trophy properties, including Pine Wild down where you are.
yes.
There was some thought that there would be more of that, and then as soon as I showed up, they stopped because the bubble burst. But
Mhm. Yes, I know the family who owns Pine Wild.
okay.
Yeah, they're selling it now.
Oh,
Mhm.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, they're trying to. They're in talks with somebody. I don't know. They won't tell me anything more than that because I'm not a part of Pine Wild, but so that's all I know. But I didn't know it was like an actual like move by the Japanese.
Back in the day, there were at the height of the investment boom, there were 11 Japanese banks in Atlanta.
Mhm.
And the sense was they were coming to North Carolina, and it would transform North Carolina from just a manufacturing foreign direct investment to all these other things like services. And again, it didn't happen. And there are very few Japanese banks with any presence at all in the Southeast right now. But what could have been, right?
Yeah, no, I know. I feel like there's a bit of a push recently though to have Japan back in North Carolina. I mean,
Oh,
I don't know.
the Japanese broke all records 2 years ago with a foreign direct investment in the Triangle, and then last year they rebroke the record with the Honda battery. So we've got the Fuji Cilicia folks, and then the Honda battery. I'm sorry, the Toyota battery.
Toyota battery. It's okay. I know what you're talking about. I've been telling it to everybody whenever, because I don't know if you knew, but I'm a real estate agent. So
Okay.
whenever anybody comes in, I'm like, oh yes, Toyota just bought over in the Greensboro area. We got batteries. So it's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, no, it's good. My practice, actually, we represent some of the Honda entities, including Honda Jet, and so that's where the slip up comes from. But the automotive technology is key because this state has been lacking for some time.
Yes, no, and then I think it was right below right below Raleigh. There's that new Vietnamese car company that's coming in. Is it Vietnamese? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
13,000 jobs, I think it is.
Yeah, it's got some hoops to jump through. We had a Chinese tire company that's still trying to figure out how that investment's going to look. So, there are challenges when the economy does this, and some of these announcements, the timing might not be great.
No, yeah, it's a tough time, tough market. But Raleigh's booming, slowly growing. It's just, I mean, it's never been that way. We'll give it let's just give it another like 3 to 5 minutes just to let
Okay.
people sign on, and then we can start. Consulate might be jumping in and out like throughout. Their schedules are busy. And then I'm looking for Jonathan's name is what I'm looking for.
Well, and I'll be looking, I'll be paying particular attention to when the consulate jumps on, because technically, I mean, they don't really pay me to be the honorary consul here, but
Yeah.
they're my boss, so I better be on my best behavior.
You have to be in line when they come in, right? No, that's good. No, they've been so helpful during this whole process. And we've got, actually, this is the first year that we've had, well, not, I guess the first year that I've been doing it. Valerie's on as well, and she used to be the treasurer for JETAA Southeast. But you and Sarah are the first time I've been doing like experts, not just volunteer alumni. Usually we have volunteer alumni run these pre-departure orientations, but I'm trying to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. So
No, these are good. These are the optional pre-orientation meetings that, okay, the Alumni Association does. Okay.
Yes.
Is the pre-departure session in person? So everybody?
So no, not this year. They were talking about having one in session in the end of July, because I think this group leaves at the end of July. I think like the last week. Does anybody know what the date of your departure is?
Yes,
July 30th.
July 30th.
July 30th.
Okay.
So July 30th, they're gone. So they were originally planning to have something in person the week before, but Japan said no. So yeah, we've got about 15 people in here right now. So 16, I lied. So if you want to start, David, you're more than welcome to start.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. And I mean, again, you're recording it, right? So if somebody if they miss something, it'll be available, correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll just get started. And so I'm David Robinson. I'm an attorney with a law firm called Nexsen Pruet. We've got offices all over the Carolinas. But I'm also the honorary consul for Japan in North Carolina, and to a little bit extent unofficially in South Carolina, since there is no consular presence in South Carolina. So in addition to being a lawyer and talking about Japanese laws tonight, I'm also a resource. So whether you have a pre-departure issue, whether you come back to the Carolinas after your JET program ends, there are some really great things going on here in the Carolinas. You got to dig a little deeper than you would in Chinatown, San Francisco, or some of the other big cities, but there are exciting things going on here, and I'm going to start with, and I'm going to end with, college students and those who have just graduated. You're always looking for a return on investment, right? I can't guarantee it, right? Because lawyers don't ever make guarantees, but I've come really close to saying, the return on investment for what you're about to do is going to be tremendous. The Japanese investment in the United States is at epic levels. The R&D, the number of North Carolinians that went to go work for Japanese companies this morning is at an all-time high. The trade with Japan is one of the largest bilateral trading relationships in the world. So that's my way of saying, even though I'm going to talk about laws and a bunch of stuff you're not allowed to do, I wanted to start off really on a positive note, saying I hope this will be the experience that I think it should be for you all. It is, we just celebrated a couple of years ago the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, and so not only do we have all of these economic ties in common, but we are really this bipartisan, this bicultural relationship that the United States has with Japan, and I would say even sort of the Southern hospitality that we have in the Southeast matched with the Japanese hospitality, it's really one of the enduring stories of hope for the world. And so y'all are going to participate in that. And I hope you're excited to do it, because I don't get paid to be an honorary consul, but I am so excited for what I do because this relationship is so important. So let's talk about by the way, I'm terribly impressed that all of you are on a call at 6:30 at night on a Friday, and that's enough dedication for me. But if you're worried about your weekends getting started correctly, I really don't think we're going to go an hour and a half here, but I will pledge to be here as long as you have questions. So please make this interactive as possible. That would be really good. And it'd be more fun for me too. So let's talk about sort of Japanese laws and rules. Hopefully you won't have to deal with a lot of Japanese laws. You will undoubtedly deal with a fair number of Japanese rules, probably a fair number of them unwritten. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference, but just note that you're going to get a lot of good orientation in these sessions and in the pre-orientation. There's just a lot of customs that are unique to Japan, and I think one of the greatest things we have is the ability to observe, right? And so for the most part, if you can take a step back and observe what the Japanese are doing and try to figure out why it makes sense and why the subways operate the way they do, and why the vending machines have what they have in them, and all the nuances of Japan, right? If you just kind of take a step back and observe, all those rules are going to eventually make sense and become second nature. I grew up in Japan, and so I had experience as a small kid. I had experience as a college student, and now as a lawyer, I go back and forth. And so if you ever, laws, rules, whatever, if you can take a step back and basically say, what are the people around me doing? The Japanese will not only show you, but they'll probably go out of their way to help walk you through a particular situation, because it is not unlike our Southern hospitality. In fact, be careful, right? If you want directions to a subway station, be prepared for that person that you ask for directions to walk you there. It still happens, and probably they'll practice their English on the way. So laws and rules. With the laws, just note that in almost all cases, and I'm going to scare you a little bit with some stories, but in all cases, Japanese laws, especially with respect to crimes and criminal conduct, is just simply non-negotiable, right? Japan is one of the safest countries of the world, and there's a reason for that. And well, there's a couple reasons, but basically people are law abiding for a reason. A, it's part of the social contract, but B, prison in Japan is a scary place. And so let me just, I'll tell you why you should behave, and then we'll move on to other fun stuff. So we took a group of lawyers to Tokyo 5 years ago. And the first thing I did was, we had these lawyers meet with a Catholic charity in Tokyo. And the women in this charity, in addition to making little rice balls for the homeless population in Tokyo, which we also got to do, we got our hands dirty, but they also talked about the letter writing campaign that they have with foreigners in Japanese prisons. These are lonely, quiet places where order is paramount. And a lot of these folks that are there because they did something, I'm going to say stupid, that's judgmental, but they did something that should have been apparent to them was wrong. And a lot of it involves drugs, and a lot of it involves taking somebody else's luggage along for the trip. In a large number of cases, these are people that are going to meet someone they met online, and could you please just carry my luggage for me? Look forward to seeing you in Tokyo. The Japanese authorities are not sentimental about the love stories that lead to criminal conduct. There are numerous foreign nationals that brought in contraband, even if they didn't know they did so, that are locked up in Japanese prisons. And these are places where you don't talk. You don't get talked to. It is a, it's a first world country, but it's an existence that no one wants. And so there's my warning to you. It comes straight from the Catholic Church in Tokyo. And again, if you have any questions, I'm going to give you some sort of resources for kind of how to navigate unfortunate situations like that. So laws in particular, and when I say non-negotiable, I mean, pretty much non-negotiable. In the United States, a speed limit on a highway is kind of a starting point, right? We kind of negotiate amongst ourselves, how far past 55 we go. In Japan, I grew up with my dad driving a car that literally beeped when it exceeded the speed limit. And it beeped and it beeped and it never stopped, and it drove you insane. And so everybody drove the speed limit so they didn't go crazy driving a car. So let's talk about practical stuff then. When you get into Tokyo, customs and border protection, you're going to find, if you've done any travel, the Japanese situation is not entirely unlike what you experience coming in and out of the United States. There's a bunch of stuff you cannot bring with you. Literally, if you're the type of person that has to bring your particular brand of cheese to Japan, then maybe you probably want to rethink doing a year in a foreign country anyway. But meats, cheeses, nuts, don't do it. Obviously, things like explosives and firearms and knives and swords and pornographic material and just, all kinds of stuff that's bad for Japanese morals can get you in an awful lot of trouble. And the Japanese do take all of that really seriously. Can I share a screen? Let me try.
Absolutely. Let me co-host you.
Okay. I want to put one thing up just in case you guys want to take some pictures of it. So I did the easy stuff, right? Don't bring firearms into Japan. Again, don't bring, who brings raw meat into a country anyway, right? Just don't do it. Am I able? There I am. All right, I want to put this up just so you all can take a quick look at it. Here's what trips people up though. And this is what's unique to Japan. Do a little, if any of these over-the-counter medicines are something that is part of your, medicine cabinet, rethink what you take, look into alternatives. These are the types of products that the Japanese uniquely do not allow into the country. Tylenol being the big one. Don't wait until you get to Japan to go to a pharmacy and ask the pharmacist for something like Tylenol. Maybe they can look it up, but probably they won't know what you're talking about, and you're at square one with a bunch of packages in Japanese. So do a little research. I can, this list is available in a number of locations, but I thought I'd put it up here real quick just in case anybody wants to snap a quick picture. I'm sure the Jet folks have it as well, but if not, certainly I can forward that around as well. Couple of the things that are kind of both rules and laws. Deadlines are important in Japan. There was a time when, there's been a little relaxation of this, but there was a time when if a Japanese family was in North Carolina and they had a child here, if they did not register that child within a certain period of time, they could lose their Japanese citizenship. Deadlines that apply to you there are important as well. If somebody says you need to get some paperwork in, if you need to register with your ward, if you've got to do X and such by such and such a date, just note that the Japanese view dates as a line in the sand, if you will. Paper is important too. I don't know if anybody from the consulate's on, but I don't think in the history of the Japanese government has a bureaucrat ever thrown a piece of paper away. I say that facetiously, but when you are handed various documents, hold on to them carefully. You may need them again. Japanese, especially in the smaller cities, or even in a big city like Tokyo, the wards are still very much paper driven, and so be prepared for that. That's going to be a shock. I think the Economist just estimated that if the Japanese government could give up 10% of its paper, the economy would grow something like the GDP would increase 2%. So it is a lot of paper, and just be prepared for that. The work day, and again, this is kind of laws and rules, right? The work day is going to look a little different than it does here, and even the JET website suggests that, right? They say it's a 35-hour workday, but there are certain times when extra hours may be required. It's up to you, of course, like how you want to treat that. But in Japan, you will learn that, there's a more team approach to these things. And so the expectation will be that you'll put in whatever time is necessary. And I've never been a JET instructor. I don't know exactly how that plays out in the context of being a JET instructor, but in my experience, both studying and working and being a camp counselor and all kinds of different iterations of a Japan experience, you put in the time to get the job done, or even just to put in the appearance. And so just be prepared for that. If you are used to punching a time clock in the United States, you're going to experience a different workday. I don't know if anybody, Julie, you want to?
Yeah, no, I can
comment on
definitely jump in here, and Valerie probably can too. For those of you who've not met Valerie, she used to be the treasurer before I was the treasurer of JETAA Southeast. And she's been doing it for a long time. And she was also in Japan. She's a JET alumni. But yeah, you're going to see a weird work weeks. You're going to be expected to come in on Saturdays. You're going to be expected to take things home with you. Some of you might not ever see that happen. Some of you might see it happen all the time. I was just telling David earlier that in JET, there's a famous phrase, and they say every situation is different. So just expect that you can be working your butt off, or you could just have a lot of time on your hands. But the workday will look a lot different, and they'll expect you to hit deadlines, and they'll expect you to do exactly what's asked of you.
Related to that, since you're both at the top of the screen with me, so the JET program, I having relocated to Japan before, deposits, Japanese contracts, it's all very important. The JET folks, I looked on the website, they say $2,500 to $3,000 should get you started. Did that do it for you? Was that a good number?
I will tell my story after I hear from Valerie. Valerie, was that a good number for you?
It was, but again, with every situation is different. My town was pretty wealthy. I didn't have to pay for housing, but I arrived later because of a issue with my passport, but I didn't get paid for like another month, almost a month and a half, almost. So all the money I had was what I brought. And I needed to figure out also how to buy a car within that time. So possibly that could be something.
Okay.
That's a very typical situation as well, the car situation. I had the city situation, which I don't know if anybody here is a city jet, but you're mostly a private school jet if you're a city jet. And what happens is you are responsible of finding your own housing. You don't get paid that first month, so you have to bring way more money with you. So I brought about $6,000 with me when I went to the JET program, and that barely covered it because I had to purchase my own furniture. I had to put the down payment on my own apartment. I had to provide for myself without a homestay. Most jets get a homestay those first 2 weeks that you're there. I did not have that, so I had to provide for myself, and I was living in the city. So I had to bring a lot more money with me. So, but Valerie got off over that 2,500. So happy for her.
Well, that's good to know. And I'll talk a little bit more about contracts in a little bit, but Japanese contracts just note that deposits are typically required, and you got to be prepared to pay those deposits. A couple other just travel things real quick before we segue. I'm a big fan of registering when you travel abroad. You get generally useful information from the US government. So it's called the STEP program. It's step.state.gov. And in fact, if you haven't been to the State Department website about Japan, you should go. There is really good synopses of life in Japan, resources that are available to you. Again, I mentioned, getting into criminal trouble. There's a list of English speaking lawyers on their website. In fact, it's one of the great resources for lawyers. There are lists of English speaking lawyers on just about every US consulate or embassy webpage all over the world. There is also a country commercial guide for Japan. So I'm going to mention, I mentioned a couple things about the important relationship we have with Japan commercially. You may be asked about that. And so having that resource available, heck, I'd print it out and bring it with you. I just as a practical matter, since you're all coming from the Southeast US, I would also bring a map, somehow, some way be able to show them where North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, wherever you're from, just because they may have heard of Michael Jordan, but and perhaps Duke University seems to be famous over there too. But honestly, you're just somewhere between Washington, D.C. and Disneyland, Disney World, Florida. Okay. So good resources there. I would enroll in the STEP program. I would do that as just a customary way of traveling. And if travel is going to be a big thing for you, I would take the time and get yourself a global entry or get enrolled in the Trusted Traveler program. Nothing is more painful than flying into one of the, LaGuardia or JFK, and you're all exhausted from a flight, and then you have to stand in line for 2 hours to clear immigration. It's the best, either $100 for global entry or just what is Trusted Travel is like $35. It's money well spent. I would do it. Also know that if you need resources that are state specific, the states in the Southeast have offices in Japan. I work quite often with Shibata-san, who's been for decades the head of the Tokyo office. They are really good resources for if people are asking questions about North Carolina, or if you just kind of need to liaison with your state some way. This is your tax dollars at work. So in addition to the federal resources that you have at the consulates within Japan and the embassy in Tokyo, you've got these state offices generally in Tokyo as well. I'll give you some numbers. Again, this is kind of why this is so important, or why I think there's going to be a return on your investment here. Here are the big numbers. So foreign direct investment in the United States. Last time we had statistics, 2019. $644 billion. Japan is the #1 investor in the United States. UK, Canada, and Germany round out the top 4, but Japan is the #1 investor here. Again, as I said, 24,000 North Carolinians went to go work for a Japanese company this morning. Almost 500,000 Americans are employed by Japanese-owned companies in the United States. What's our annual? There are 4th largest trading relationship. $183 billion is a really big number. You probably might get asked about the Japanese, the big deal that they signed a free a trade agreement with the United States. The US-Japan, I guess it's just the US-Japan trade agreement, US JETAA, was signed 2 years ago. It's going to improve the access to Japan for a bunch of mostly ag products. So great for the Southeast US, great for our soybeans and our hogs and, you know, all the sweet potatoes and whatnot. And the Japanese get some corresponding benefits here too. So that free trade agreement in particular, I think, you know, it's one of those rising tides lifts most boats. And I think a lot of those boats that are going to prosper are here in the Southeast US. Again, it was a big ag focus and a really big additional focus on digital trade. And of course, we do a lot of that here. I'll give you a quick overview of sort of the system of government there and how we get laws from the Japanese side. So it's, you know, it's a parliamentary system. We helped write the Constitution of Japan, obviously went into effect in 47 is when it went into effect, written in 46. But it has a distinctly Japanese element to it, right? Article 1, Chapter 1 is all about the emperor and the role of the emperor. But once you get past the emperor, which is primarily ceremonial and in Japan, but with some sort of carve outs for policy making, but in general, it's ceremonial. And so what you're going to have is a parliamentary country where you got a diet, which is their parliament, and you've got two houses in there. And one of the members of the diet ends up being the prime minister, and the prime minister has a cabinet. I don't know whether you all will get to experience a Japanese election. I hope you do. They are great fun. People get up on, they drive vans around with loudspeakers, and it's wonderful. It's great fun. You get to see how an election, you know, anyhow, you'll see how the campaigning is done on a retail level, and it's loads of fun. Again, it's a parliamentary system, so there are no scheduled elections in the next year, but who knows, right? That could change. I don't think it will, but I think it could change. There's a third branch of government. So you've got the prime minister with the executive function. You've got the diet that's doing legislative, and then you've got the Japanese court system, which is run by a Supreme Court. So some countries have sort of a constitutional court. The Japanese system is much more akin to ours. You got a Supreme Court and you've got lesser courts. I'll tell you real quick about, again, y'all are going to behave and there aren't going to be any problems, but you know, the big changes in laws in Japan have really been in the criminal justice arena. And so I'll kind of walk you through how that is different from here. And again, it's part of it is a cautionary tale. So in Japan, you've heard that the Japanese conviction rate is somewhere around 99%. I think it's actually greater than 99%. But here's how they get there. So you can be detained in Japan. And again, this is not a third world situation, right? They have the Japanese police in general are just wonderfully helpful people, especially if you get lost. By the way, they have these in the big cities, they have these koban where they always have maps. They're always happy to chat with you about it. I spent part of my childhood in one of those, just hanging out because we happen to live next to the Chinese embassy, and you know, we had a great time with the police officers. So this is not something they do arbitrarily. But they do have the ability to hang on to you for up to 23 days while they are sorting out whether you have done something wrong. Now, that can be shorter sometimes if you apologize and there's some restitution. Again, this is a country where that is important. But just note that they have the ability to hang on to somebody for a while. And here's the one diplomatic thing I will tell you. So there's a Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. This is true for all your foreign nationals that are here in the United States. you have the ability, a Japanese individual has the ability to have me come visit them. If they have a problem, if they want me to know how they've been treated, same for you in Japan. You know, the US Embassy will send somebody, will liaison on your behalf, maybe help with some translation, but you have to ask for it. So just make a note that that is not automatic. It's something you have to ask for. Same thing here in the United States. I don't get to help somebody from Japan unless they ask for my assistance. So they've got 23 days to kind of put their case together. They'll drop about 3/4 of these cases before they ever get to an indictment. Same kind of system we have here with an indictment. But they can hold you while the police are doing their whole investigation. You may not get your Japanese version of Miranda rights for 24 hours-ish. So it's good to stay out of trouble, right? Don't be jaywalking in Japan for no good reason. But they'll drop a bunch of the cases because they're only going to prosecute the ones that they can win. And again, that's how they get to almost 100% conviction rate for crimes in Japan. The big changes have been, so it's always been, it's a civil country, and you may hear the difference. This may come up, right? We're a common law country like the UK. Japan is a civil law country in general. I mean, we gave them a constitution, a few other things, but they're a civil law country. And so generally there hasn't been a jury in Japan until very recently. They do now have this Saiban-in system where there are jurors now, but those are only for just, you know, high profile people that have done something or that are alleged to have done something really bad. Other than the fact that it's very judicial, lots of, you know, the focus is on the judges, not on the juries. The police are, you know, always sitting in the courtroom. It can look a little intimidating, but other than that, you know, it's really otherwise the same. You've got the same Miranda rights. You might not get them for a while, but you'll get them eventually. You have a right to a translator, innocent until proven guilty, all of those familiar things in the criminal justice context. Let me see what else is. So let's talk about contracts in Japan, because I think this is interesting, and I think it might have some benefit, perhaps not to your JET studies, and so I'll keep it short, but to, you know, just kind of doing business with the Japanese in general. I helped a company out one time. It was a U.S. company. They were going private, and they had a huge operation in Japan. And our job was to review their larger commercial contracts. And by larger in the United States, I would assume it to be both higher dollar amounts and more pages. We just did a deal last month that was in the hundreds of pages. The Japanese contracts that we reviewed were all averaged about 6 pages long. And this tells you a little something about the society in general. So whereas we would have a 17-page dispute resolution, if something goes wrong, here's how we're going to fix it. And we're going to go to arbitration, we're going to go to mediation, we're going to go to court. Here's when we get to go to court, who pays for it, and we're going to outline all this. In Japan, it's first things first. We're going to get, you know, the managers together. And if that doesn't work, we're going to escalate it to the company presidents, and they need to meet in person. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to bring in somebody that they both respect, and he's going to tell them what to do, or she's going to tell them what to do. It's a collaborative, long-term perspective. And so you're going to see that not just in contracts, but in society in general. There are a lot of legal protections in a transactional space that are like what we have here, right? You've got labor protections, you've got intellectual property protections, you've got a lot of companies in North Carolina or in the Southeast use Japanese agents and distributors, some of these trading companies that help get products into Japan. It's hard to, the nice thing about you're going to Japan now versus when I grew up in Japan is you're not going to have to sneak onto the military bases to get American candy. Just about anything you want is now available in Japan. You still don't see, by the way, Doritos, Tostitos, they taste different in every country, but that's a good thing. You might like it better in Japan. So it's the marketplace in Japan has changed, right? It's a global marketplace. But in order for Frito-Lay to get those products onto those shelves, it probably has had to partner with a Japanese company. The Japanese companies, especially the trading companies, you'll hear like Itochu or Mitsui Bussan or Mitsubishi, these bigger trading, these bigger Keiretsu, these bigger groups of companies are indispensable for Japan because it's relationship driven. You're going to find that, and I hope you value any experiences you get to go to a Japanese person's home for dinner. Or I don't know if the JET program has an alcohol consumption rule. Okay. So most business is done at, there's generally the office hours, and then you go out and actually transact business. You may handle the details during office hours, but a lot of it is just relationship driven. And I felt so bad when I was a study abroad student as a junior. My Japanese homestay dad was diagnosed with some kind of a liver problem, and it really wasn't a bad medical situation, but he couldn't drink anymore. And everybody kept, the condolences just kept coming and coming. It was like he would never get promoted again. And honestly, maybe he didn't. That sort of thing is just so important there. Other Japanese, I made some notes. I don't want to just kind of keep rambling. If I haven't, what haven't I touched on in general?
So I actually had a question for you. And I don't know if you know much about this, but it's very common for when jets leave the JET program, they want to stay in Japan. And what happens is they usually go to these English consulting firms with 3-year contracts that try to lock them down. And I was wondering if you knew anything about that and if you could talk on that a little bit, if you did.
So I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you, but I guess we can reiterate, since we're talking about laws, right? The JET parameter says, while you're in the JET program, no arubaito, no what's the new term? Side hustles. That's not permitted. I did that in Japan, and it was a tremendous experience. And so, even after the JET program, if you can then migrate into some other program, that's great. Again, the visas are part of the problem. Visas are in a state of flux, just so you know. So you all are somewhat exempt from that because others are handling that for you. But whereas historically, any of us, and I'm going to get around to answering your question, but any of us could have gone to Japan for up to 90 days without a visa, called the visa waiver program. Same thing, Japanese could have come here for 90 days. That has been suspended due to COVID. So everyone is having to get visas now to go to Japan. Tourists are not allowed unless they're part of a tour group. So gradually the Japanese have started to open it up, but there's been a bit of a backlog because the consulates in Atlanta, for instance, generally most people go to Japan without a visa because they're going to be there for less than 90 days. So they're having this influx of visa applications that they didn't have to deal with before. So long-winded way of saying sort of COVID has changed the landscape, and I'm not sure when it's going to change back. So whatever time typically you've tried to plan for the next phase after the JET program, I would double that planning period, just because of the visa situation. With respect to, contracts in Japan, they've gotten rid of, involuntary servitude as well. You can get out of contracts, and any reputable organization will not keep your paperwork or something like that, right? There's an official internship post JET, is there not? And is there not like almost a job fair for these positions?
So, I don't know.
Or maybe
Valerie,
that's an old thing.
So once you're done with the JET program, you're done right now. So the moment you turn in that resignation, you're done. You can't jump back in. You can't negotiate yourself back in. Like I try to do that, no go. When you say you're done, you're done.
Right, and you have to leave, correct?
And you have to, no, you don't have to leave. If you can get yourself another visa with a different company, you can stay. And then you can stay for 90 days. I guess not anymore because of COVID, but you can stay if you can get yourself a different visa, long-term, different company that you're working with.
Okay. And a Japanese employment situation is, you probably heard historically that, it was lifetime employment and all of that. That's actually quite rare in Japan now. You're going to see these more temp positions, and they're going to look a whole lot more like our gig economy here. People employing you on an hourly basis. Do note that, the Japanese social network, or the safety net is also somewhat non-negotiable. And in the same way that part of your JET funds are being taken out for insurance and their version of Social Security and that sort of thing, that's any reputable company is gonna do that as well. And so if you don't see that, that'd be a red flag for me.
I'm jumping in again, David. So if you're going to continue that thought, I'm
anytime.
sorry. I have, when I was in Japan, which was 2018, 2019, one of those years. I think it was 2019 I left. We had a few of my friends who had decided to leave the JET program, went into these English consulting firms, and they were scams, long hours, not much business. They tried to lock you down with fear for a 3-year contract, that you couldn't leave Japan, that you were tied to them. So that's just one of the things that came to me this morning when I was like, oh, I could ask David if he's heard of that, or if it's actually like binding, like that 3-year contract. I don't think it is because they've all left, but.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It would not be. But I've not heard of that specifically, but yeah, I do know also that, the Japanese can sometimes use us, like any country would, as for marketing purposes. And so make sure that there's a real job associated with it, and that you're not just being put on somebody's website because they have access to, Americans, even if they don't have customers. Now a lot of it's going to certainly be legit, certainly in the larger cities, I would think. I haven't heard of that, but I'll kind of be on the lookout for it.
Yeah, it was just a few. And Valerie, have you ever heard of that happening?
Sorry, trying to unmute. I have not, although I had not a similar situation, but a different interesting situation. I did, after JET, I contracted with a board of education, and it was a 2-year contract. I had actually returned home. I came back for the 2-year, what I thought was the 2-year contract, but then they changed it mid-year against our knowledge, and actually hired more JET participants. And so using the contract, I said, well, my contract was 2 years. So you owe me either the salary if I'm going to go to, it was another company. interact.
Mm.
Either you pay me the same, or well, it wasn't an or else, but they did.
Hmm.
I don't know if that was just an off situation, but it was just odd that I signed it and they already knew that they had negotiated with this other company. I was only going to be there part of the year.
Hmm. Okay. I
So,
don't
sorry.
know, but I would wager that, if you do have problems that, the folks at the embassy would love to hear about it. I wouldn't be surprised if there was there's no, I don't know, to my knowledge, whether there's an English language Better Business Bureau. So I don't know that exists, but I would suspect that some form of that either exists at the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan, or at the or at the embassy. But I would for sure take a look at that, and to some extent I know folks that have gone back and they've been an aerobics instructor, or they've been gotten into a modeling agency. There's a lot of the talent search folks that are interested in foreign ethnic faces for TV commercials and the like. I sold ice cream when I was a little kid there, in my only TV debut. And so, I'd be on the lookout for those types of scams too. It's not hard to, the better companies are in the better locations. Location is important. Status is important. There are, the American Chamber of Commerce is probably a great place. There are message boards. There's a career board there as well. I will say that you all are going at apparently a pretty good time. I mean, when you talk supply and demand, there is, there's a bit of a shortage of folks due to COVID with, native English language skills like you all are bringing to the table, and that'll be certainly something valued in Japan. I've seen a couple questions.
So
Julia, I haven't.
yeah, we do have a couple questions, but really quickly, I just wanted to ask, just so I know, if people can raise their hand with the reaction button, who wants to stay in Japan after the JET program? Just to get kind of an idea before we hit these questions. Catherine, Sid, and that's kind of, Alex, and somebody else, Selena. Okay, cool. We got about 4 or 5 people. Excellent. Maybe, possibly Kara, Jared, maybe. Okay. So I just want to have like an audience, like an idea of who we were talking to about that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and let me, I can pull together some research. Again, it's been a while, but I do know some of the resources for, even if you wanted a taste of something other than teaching English, right? There are message boards at the American Chamber, and other places. Let me see if I can put if that would be helpful to the group.
I think
Let me
that
put
would.
some of those links together, and y'all can just curate that over time.
Perfect. That would be very helpful. So what we're going to do is we're going to touch base through some of these questions that have popped up.
Okay.
The first one that we're going to, okay, so yes. So Evan, I'm just going to answer this one because I was the one who brought up English consulting firms. I do not know the name of the English consulting firms. They tend to change and rapidly. So I would just read the description. If you go and interview, just kind of trust your gut. If things don't start making sense, like if they demand certain things of you that aren't right, that's where you should start kind of just trust your gut on that one. And then ask people around you. If it's a different city, ask the people who live in that city. There are JET alumni everywhere, and there's always people willing to help. So
yeah, and consulting is such a broad term. In Japan, most of these companies are going to have a hook, if you will, right? They're a law firm with a consulting arm. They're an accounting firm. They're a product placement. They're a marketing and distribution, right? If they're just consulting, I would worry about that, because I don't know that a lot of Japanese are going to pay for consulting. I would dig and see exactly what they're going, what's their shtick, right? What are they selling to the world? And then that'll give you the due diligence to, that's what you should do your due diligence on.
Exactly. And Glassdoor and different job review sites exist in Japan too. And the same way you filter through it here for fake reviews and different things like that, you can do the same thing in Japan. If all you see is great reviews, something might be a little fishy there, because not 100% of the people always love one thing, like one company. So that's a good way of fishing through it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Alex. Okay, this is the paper copy. So Alex is asking, you mentioned that we should keep papers we get in Japan, which is fine. But if we happen to make a digital copy of that just to be safe and lost the original copy, would they still accept the digital copy?
Depending on the document, in my experience, they'd make you come down, stand in a line, and get a new paper copy. Now, that digital copy may help you, and you should keep digital copies of everything, right? That's just basic travel, your passport, your credit cards, your debit cards, your health insurance, all this kind of stuff. Keep digital copies. But the Japanese are keen to replace paper with paper, and it takes time. And those of you that have been in Japan, there is, there's a process, and it can, especially in Tokyo, I found it's not fast.
No, they if it's maybe this will be a great help for an example. So, and this might, Valerie, you might think the same way, but when I was in my school, I had a question. I had to ask the presiding person over me. That person had to confirm with me what I wanted. That person would then have to ask the head of their department if it was okay. That person would then make a decision, relay it to the person that I had spoke to first. That person would relay it to me. And then they would go to the next person above the second person that had been spoken to. That line chain would come back down to me. Then they would go to the vice principal. Vice principal would make a decision. That decision would have to be relayed. Everybody would have to agree with it. And then it would go to the principal. So instead of just walking up to the vice president and having that conversation, it had to go through 5 different people. And everybody had to agree before any decision could be made. And everything was done with paper. We had to submit some sort of report with it. So when David's talking about an obscene amount of paper, he's not lying. It's an obscene amount of paper.
Well, and you brought up another important Japanese word. There's a Japanese word called nemawashi, and it literally means to prepare the soil before you plant the tree. And that's a really nice colloquial way of saying you got to talk about stuff for a long time until everybody buys in. Now, the Japanese are some of the slowest to make decisions, stereotypically, right? Slowest to make a decision, but fastest to implement, right? Because they take so much time to get everybody on exactly the same thought process. Then they move as a group. And so there's a lot of back and forth. Again, I've worked in Japan. We've certainly negotiated a lot of contracts there, and it takes time. It takes time.
Absolutely. But Alex, to answer your question, you should 100% try to keep the paper document. Digital copy will only get you so far. All right, let's see here. What's the next question? Jared, when you say need to leave early, are you talking from school or from the program? From this call. Okay. Okay, yeah, I understand the question now. Yeah, so I will, if David's okay with that, we can definitely ask him to be a point of contact. If you're okay with providing us with an email address or just contacting me first, and then I can ping that message over to David.
No, I'm happy. And Jared, yeah, you could have whatever hall pass you need. I didn't see the question, but I will. Yeah, I'll let them. They can certainly pass out my my email and my contact information.
Perfect. Okay.
And the other thing I'll try to do, it sounds like y'all could benefit from. Let me see if I can have somebody help me create a data sheet which has the points of contact of sort of some of the federal contacts that I've mentioned, but the state offices I think are key. If you don't go to Japan and visit your state office, right, you've missed an opportunity to make a valuable professional contact, I think. In the same way that you're welcome to reach out to me from time to time as well. I'll try to put all that together, and I'll see if I've got some. I know I've got some folks over there that can help me with career message boards and things in English.
Okay. Yeah, that would be extremely helpful, David.
Okay.
Okay. So Cameron, I'm going to read this one full since I messed up on the last one. Okay. I was wondering on the Japanese ban on things they find NSFW. I feel like I knew what that meant at one time and now I don't. What does that mean?
It means like not safe for work. So any like, something that's not PG.
Mm-hmm. So would you ask your question since you're on the video now?
Yeah, Cameron, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So NSFW just means like not safe for work. So something that contains nudity or contains violence or gore. In college, I worked with a lot of artists and have a lot of copies of individuals' artist books. Some of them may be erotic. Some of them, there might be, allusions to violence. Is that kind of stuff I shouldn't be able to bring into Japan if it's fine art, or, of a book of like paintings of nude women going to be an issue bringing into the country?
Yeah, so that it's a great question. It's a tough answer because you're going to see I think the Customs and Border Protection folks are going to use a slightly different standard than you're going to find in Japan, right? There are parts of Tokyo where, that would not shock anybody, right? And much worse. But for purposes of what you can bring into the country, I would play it conservative, honestly, because you could lose stuff like that when you come in, and you could spend a lot of time in customs that you don't want to spend in customs. There is no, so we're American lawyers. We like definitions, right? But we've got you've got a JET program standard that's no inappropriate acts, right? Without being defined. You've got a customs, there is a customs, in fact, I'll send you, I've got the printout sitting right here. The best that the Japanese government is going to give you is books, drawings, carvings, or any other article which may harm public safety or morals. Parentheses, obscene or immoral materials, e.g. pornography. Certainly child pornography gets its own line, but it's very vague. And I think I saw somebody say something about shipping it in. If it's something that's important to you and your career, yeah, it's probably easier to get it in that way than to have it, with you. I would be really careful coming into the country. Now, again, the moral standard is going to be really different in very different parts of Japan, right? There's a rural Japan. There's, for those of you who've been in Tokyo, there's, the Shinjuku area. There are different Japans, and I would be very conservative, and I would be very aware of what Japan you're in, and I would be very sensitive to that. Again, you're an ambassador, which is an ambassador of our culture and what you bring to Japan, but you're also in their home, and I would be really respectful of how they view this very general category of undefined immorality.
Yeah, absolutely. And every customs agent is different. I just want to say that, I was able to get through with my inhaler and not the medical document that you need to have. I took a risk. Somebody else from a different cohort did not get through with that. So that's just an example of different, same airport, different officers at custom, different reaction. So
Yeah,
just,
and if you have something that is in a gray area, whatever you can do, and I'm not just talking about sort of, various versions of, of things that may or may not be obscene, just anything in general, right? Prescription drugs, things that are in a generic bottle that shouldn't be in a generic bottle, anything like that. Take the time and create a contemporaneous record in Japanese, if possible, if at all possible, that describes why you need to do something a certain way. That will often carry the day and save you a lot of grief and confiscated materials.
And then I had another question under that one that was about, like, is there anywhere we can read up about our workers' rights in Japan, or anywhere that you suggest, like, understanding how those systems work better?
So actually, here's where I would start. I could send you some really technical stuff, but you don't want to read that unless you have a sleep disorder. I would start with the country commercial guide. So I would go to the State Department. Every embassy has something called a US and FCS. It's the United States Foreign and Commercial Service. They are going to have detail. There's a Japan desk at the State Department. And I would start with it's not lengthy, but there's going to be a write-up of sort of labor laws and rights and responsibilities there. It's probably the best place to start. And if you don't find the answers to what you're looking for, you're welcome to email me, and I can, if this is something that you really have an interest in, especially if you're in one of the bigger cities, heck, I'll get you, a lunch appointment with a labor lawyer. And if you're really interested, you could ask them tons of questions. We can make that work.
yeah, David, whatever you have for us, definitely throw it our way, just so we can start creating that database. I threw in the State Department's Japan desk website, just the Japan website from the State Department here. And I know that the trade link I threw up a little bit earlier. But yeah, if any of you guys have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me and or David. And if it's something that I need to funnel over to him, I definitely will. Does that answer your question, Cameron?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Excellent. All right, so the next question we have is about, Sarah's question. And Sid, I see that your hand is raised, and we're going to get to you after Evans. I think that was the order. So Sarah's question was, my husband is coming as my dependent, and he will be looking for work once we arrive. He will be able to either work limited hours part-time, or he would be able to change his visa if he did find employment that would sponsor his visa, right? Thank you.
Sponsorship is key. Absolutely, sponsorship is key. If you have company sponsorship, then yeah, things are taking longer because of COVID. I would plan for that. But sponsorship is key. It's even with the emergency travel that we've had to do for the last 3 years to Tokyo. Even high level executives going to Tokyo, we had to get a Japanese, the Japanese company had to document really carefully why they needed this person. It had to go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, had to come through me and through the Atlanta consulate. It can be time consuming, but the sponsorship is key. Very few people can self-sponsor, as in the United States, very few people can self-sponsor for a work authorized visa.
Perfect. Sarah, did we answer your question?
Yeah, mostly. I was just making sure that was something that if he did find that sponsorship would be possible to change status from dependent to having basically his own visa independent. So thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was possible.
Yes, it is. The answer I don't have for you is whether it's possible to change status while in Japan without having to leave and come back. I don't know the answer to that. But if you come across a situation because of COVID and because of just the way that these are getting processed. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, that's a
Okay,
tricky one.
no worries. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I'll just look further into that. Thank you so much.
of course. All right, Evan, did you want to ask your question or do you want me to read it? Yeah,
Oh yeah, I can just reread it if you want.
perfect.
So I was wondering, a couple of years ago, I studied abroad for college in Japan, and they told us like, oh yeah, your residence card, you have to have that with you at all times, because if like a police officer asks you for it, and if you don't have it, they can like arrest you. Is that like a super common thing that happens? And does anyone here know if we'd be using something similar with JET? I'm just not sure, because it's studying abroad versus like working abroad through the government. So
What university were you at?
Oh, I was at Waseda very briefly. I only had like one semester, but I enjoyed it a lot. It had a very
Okay.
nice gosh, what was it? It was CJL, so they had a thing for like Japanese second language students there. That I really miss those classes.
Waseda is not bad to have on your resume. Good school. So the answer to your question is, I'll tell a story. So in a bigger city, maybe. In a smaller town, everyone will know you pretty quickly, or at least people around you. I was in the middle of Tokyo and staying in a homestay, and about halfway through the homestay, my Japanese mom pulled me aside and said, the community is a little worried. There was a 7-Eleven on the way to the train station. And so I'd grab breakfast and eat while walking to the train station, which is not commonly done. And people were worried about my health, and that made it so people are always watching. The Japanese are going to be intrigued by you. And also they're just, it's much more of a community. And these smaller towns, I would wager that you do not, so to answer your question, probably do not need to carry your card, because at some point in time, your notoriety will achieve a certain level where that's not important. In the larger cities, I never did. Just, it may help if you get yourself in trouble, but don't get in trouble, I think is there are no like random foreigner stops in a country like Japan. So I mean, here's a lawyer telling you don't do something they tell you to do, but I think it's probably okay not to.
Okay, that makes sense.
Don't go jogging and panic because you forgot to bring your card with you on a run. No, not that kind of country.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, Sid, you are up.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, sorry, I have 3 questions. I'll go from like the simple to like a little bit more like probably in depth. So the first one was in the beginning. Obviously, firearms, none of that is allowed. But maybe I'm just being a bit paranoid. But are razor blades like because are they allowed? Are they okay to bring into the country?
You mean like
for like shaving?
Oh,
For
yeah.
shaving.
No worries.
Okay, all right, perfect. And then my second question is, my knowledge of the whole judicial and then law is very superficial just from what I've heard. But I was under the impression, because you mentioned earlier that you're innocent until proven guilty. I was under the impression that it was the other way around, that you were guilty until proven innocent, or / released from detainment.
So it's a hybrid, right? You are innocent until proven guilty, but you are detained upon reasonable submission until they can assess the facts, and they have a long time to do it. So the standard is immutable, right? That there's a standard that you are innocent until proven guilty, and they have to prove it. And whether you plead guilty or not is up to you, and that's enshrined in the Constitution. And I think in practice it occurs. The difference in systems, though, is they can take you off the streets for a period of time. Now they have to keep proving, right? So they can detain you for 48 hours, anybody. And then if they can get a prosecutor to agree to look into things, they get another 10 days. Then there's a 10-day extension. So it's a system, but it is a system that is, you don't want to participate in because it's different in that way, right? And bail for foreigners, almost never given. The Japanese probably won't get it until after an indictment, and a foreigner without a permanent residence in Japan probably will never get it. So you're stuck in the system for some period of time that it would be quite unusual under our laws.
And that was the what you mentioned already, the up to 23 days. So okay.
Yeah, and it can go longer than that, but 23 is kind of the number we generally throw out because it's 2 + 1 + 10 + 10, like I've said.
Okay. It's like as long as they if they're able, for example, like you said, if they are able to get a prosecutor to agree, then it extends essentially.
Well, because Japanese, they don't do hearsay. They don't, it's all about witnesses. So they're going to go around and interview a bunch of people. And that's how the judicial system, that's how convictions are secured, right? Either by, folks confessing to a crime or getting a lot of witnesses to sort of support the claim. And that takes time, and they give themselves plenty of it to do that.
Okay.
It's just a different system.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, that made it much more clear. Thank you. Okay, so my final question is, when we were talking about kind of the expectations for working hours, how it's working over there is it's not just clocking in and clocking out. And it's there's even a joke in the culture where it's it's not a matter of whether or not it would depend, but it's not a matter of whether or not you do overwork or not, it's how many, that's the joke. But this probably may just ultimately depend on how it's addressed in our contract, but would that be covered? If let's say we're expected to show up on a Saturday, for example, or do overwork essentially, is that essentially covered? Because I know in a very traditional Japanese company, overwork, being paid for overwork is not a thing, at least in very traditional companies. And again, it depends on the company. I would imagine more modern companies do that, but yeah.
So I actually want the JET folks to chime in on this as well. But the legal parameters are, right, don't get taken advantage of. If you believe you're being taken advantage of, the JET program needs to know that. Okay, so escalate it. If I'm not going to tell anybody to, the Japanese, have a word for death by overworking, right? You don't allow yourself to be put in a situation where people are clearly taking advantage of you at some risk or peril. That said, if you're the type of person that is going to get to hour 34 in a week and start counting the minutes to hour 35 so that you can pack up your things and go, I don't think you're going to enjoy Japan. It's a different culture. It's a different work environment. And it's actually, I would say try it. Right? I would say try it and see if it might not be your cup of tea, right? But there are friendships in a Japanese workplace that you probably don't get in an older, more institutionalized, not particularly hip American company. The newer companies have, I think, figured this out a little bit better. But just be so I want the JET folks to weigh in. But first and foremost, don't get taken advantage of, and if you do, speak up, and if that doesn't work, escalate it.
Valerie, do you have anything to say on what was just asked?
Yes. So for me, I would just say typically I work 7 to 4. That was my hours, whatever. I had my time off for lunch or whatever. But then sometimes I did depending, maybe once a week, because by 12 on Friday, I was done. So then after that, I'd go to an elementary school, but I'd get like compensated with extra vacation time. So if there was a festival on the Saturday, I go to that on the Saturday. It was past my allotted hours. They compensate me with vacation time. I had so much extra vacation time that I had probably like, I could take a month off and still not even go into my paid leave. So, you know, each town is different. But I didn't see it, you know, it's kind of a once in a lifetime type of experience. I didn't see everything of as, now it's hour 33, it's time for me to leave. I didn't see it that way.
Yes, and you were public jet, right, Valerie?
Yes.
Yes. So everybody take what I say with a grain of salt, because again, I'm a private school jet, which means my life is very much different. It's not run by the BOE. It's not run by the Tokyo government. There's no connection between government and what I was doing. It was just private school. So it was written into my contract that I was supposed to be there on Saturdays. It was like optional, not optional, but 30 some odd hours a week, 35, and then Saturdays. Like they were just put in there as just extra, no hours were put in there, no whatever. It's just 35 hours a week, possibly Saturdays, and then extra time. So it was very open-ended. So I was expected to go to, I was expected to be one of the teachers for when the Japanese students were practicing for their English exams. I was expected to be there from the time that school ended until the time that they left. So that could stretch on in the evenings, and that lasted for maybe like 2 to 3 weeks in November and 2 to 3 weeks in February, maybe. I don't know, Valerie, if you can remember when those were, or if you had to do those. Yeah. So mine were very open-ended. I got more vacation days than normal public school jets did, but not because I went in on Saturdays, just because they were already given to me. I was just expected to be there when they wanted me there. It never went over that line of like, I thought I was working too hard. I still had most weekends off. I still had a lot of free time and vacations, but I mean, every situation is going to be different, and it's going to be one of those things where you're there to do the job, so kind of think to yourself, when am I being taken advantage of, and when am I just doing my job? That's kind of what I'd say on that. I don't know how David feels about that, or Valerie, but that's kind of my opinion on it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you've had my legal advice. Now, my practical advice is, the experiences are, there's an untold number of experiences, and, I go to foreign countries and I don't like to sleep because I might miss experiences. And so this is just a great opportunity, right? I mean, if you get the opportunity, I swam on a Japanese swim team, and, I've never bowed to a pool before in my life. And it took, a lot of hours to do it. And it was a lot of like meeting to talk about practices. We didn't just jump in the pool, right? We had to plan this stuff, and you just got to kind of get used to that. But you might have a group of students in a speech contest, or with a particular, goal in mind. And yeah, it might be a good idea to jump in with both feet on that.
And usually those commitments aren't defined by hours. Not saying, again, I'm not saying that to be, you do what they say, because there have been jets that have been taken advantage of. And when you know that it's happening to you, definitely reach out to Claire, and you'll know, because you'll be doing tons of work outside of school. And that's not what you're there for. You're there to be an assistant language teacher. So if it gets to that point that you're just being weighed down by work, definitely speak to somebody, because it's really important that you stay mentally healthy. You're an American. You're there for cultural exchange. You're not there to be, a full-time employee. But yeah, there's an experience there, and there are some things that will not be defined in your contract.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, my main concern was just like those extreme cases, like, where you're like pulling in like very long hours. Like, so yeah.
And have you
Well,
guys
and-
heard of Claire? Like Claire yet? Have you guys talked about Claire? Anybody know about Claire?
Apart from the documents, like for example, I know like they have a key role in like the jet accident insurance, for example.
Yeah, they're gonna be your main point of contact when you're in Japan. So it's not gonna be the embassies anymore. It's not gonna be the jet program. When you're in Japan, you're talking to Claire. And Claire is gonna handle all the issues that you come across. They'll give you names and of people that you need to contact, and you'll reach out to them directly, and they'll be the people who are assisting you. And David, I probably should have told you that before this. I totally just thought about that because I could have gotten you some documentation from Claire. But we're going to move on. But Sid, that was a really great question. And
Thank you so much, guys.
Catherine, I think that you had a question about self-defense.
Yeah, so I understand that like Japan is generally a safer country, but I just like moving through the world as a woman is kind of scary sometimes. I've heard horror stories about stalking, whatever. And right now I have like a little stab stick situation on my keys. I just like really feel like that's not gonna fly, and I just don't even want to like bother. So I guess like, are there any recommendations for sort of like self-defense things for women? I don't really know like what's allowed in terms of like I know that there's like some keychain stuff, or I don't know, just any advice would be greatly appreciated because I don't want to like sneak weapons into the country.
That's a good instinct. But let me give that some serious thought and put some resources together. That's a really good question. And again, I've had 20-year-old daughters traverse Japan by themselves just fine. Again, Japan has got to be one of the safest countries on the planet. And situational awareness is key. Also sign up for the State Department, right? Because if something goes south, and every once in a while some fringe group does something in Japan, you'll get the alerts. They'll tell you where not to go from time to time. You should always ask around, right? Especially if you're in a big city like Tokyo. There are parts of Tokyo I wouldn't go to, because there's just no reason to, right? You're asking for trouble. With that said, some of the dingiest looking eateries under the train tracks are some of the best food in Japan, right? You can eat you can eat anything in Japan, right? Like the hygiene is crazy. You can eat and drink. So let me actually be more deliberate and try to get the jet folks some resources. I don't know whether you can carry pepper spray in Japan or not. I don't know the answer to that. I should. So let me research that.
Yeah, I don't know either. Valerie, do you know?
I do not.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's a really good question though.
For what it's worth, pepper spray, even in the US, like if you were to incidentally like spray someone who wasn't involved or like not an attacker, like they can 100% sue you. So I'm sure that there's probably some like similar vibes going on in Japan where like if someone else were to be like implicated in it, it would probably like not be in your best
I-
interest.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
I-
surprised.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that
I'm sorry, go ahead.
pepper spray is completely illegal in Japan.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, I said I read somewhere recently that like pepper spray is completely illegal in Japan.
I wouldn't be surprised, but I'd be kind of happy to look into it. Any travel situation, again, I have 3 daughters, y'all's age, travel in numbers. There is a lot of alcohol consumed in Japan. There's not a lot of sort of surreptitious alcoholic drink tampering that goes on in Japan. I mean, it probably happens, but I'm not aware. It's not something that's publicized, so there's not a great deal of it. But there's a lot of people that consume too much alcohol because it's a cultural thing, and that creates problems. And so it's going to be more situational awareness than anything.